Hello Codebase family, today we will take a look at loops in Python, the for and while loops. So what are loops? Loops help us to iterate over a particular list or tuple or any other iterable data set, or to even perform a number of operations without writing many lines of code. So with just a few lines of code, we'll be able to perform a particular operation multiple times without repeating ourselves so much. And we have the for and then the while loops. So let us quickly explain them with examples. I have here again my list of planets, which we saw when we were doing the list tutorial. And let's say I want to print all the elements of the list one after the other. We saw the other day during the tutorial that we can print and call planet, then open and close square brackets, and we put the index that we want to print in there. This, of course, will print Mercury for us onto the terminal. But what if I want to print all of them? Then the traditional way and hard-coded way is to duplicate this line about 8 times and then change all of these numbers to the particular indices that I want to print. But you know that this is a very tiresome process. What if there are more than 100 or even 100 things in our list? It will just not make the work convenient for us to do it like that. I think I even have one more. Let me cut it off. So this one, of course, will print them one by one to the terminal for us. And then, but this is not the way you should go about it. As I said, in case there are more than like 100 or even 1,000 things that we have to print. It turns out that we can use the for loop to simplify this work, where we declare just 2 lines of code and then we'll get the same thing done also. So this is how the for loops work in Python. We just say for and then say a variable in iterable, and then we indicate the end of the for loop with the colon, and then here we can do something. So this variable here is what we will use to represent each of the elements of the iterable dataset that is coming into the for loop inside that particular block of code. So in this our case, if we are to call the for loop on this planet's list, an iterable dataset is actually a list is an iterable dataset because we can iterate over it. If we call the variable the for loop on this planet's list, then it means for the first iteration, the variable will be equal to Mercury. For the second iteration, the variable will be equal to Venus, the third Earth, and then up to Neptune. So instead of variable, you can call it anything here. So I'll say for item, or even more specifically for planet in. And then in this case, our iterable name is planet. So for planet in planet. And then there's something we want to do here is to print planet, not planets, planet. Just like that. And in this case, it will look through all of them one by one. And then at each iteration, the planet will change based on the index where we are. And then it will print it to the terminal for us. The code will look like the one we just did at first, just that this one is, instead of 8 lines of code, this one is in 2 lines of code. That is one of the use of the loops, for loop in Python. It helps us to do things like this, very simple. And it is mostly used in conjunction with another function that comes inbuilt with Python called the range function, which is also used to declare a range of numbers. So let's comment these 2 lines out and even see what the range function can provide us. Declare another for loop and say for I in range. And in this case, the range will be the same thing that we declared up there. We want to now print I. Each of the i's that will come through each of the iteration, just print the number that is in the range for us. So when we run loops, I'll get from 0 up to 10. It's up to the index that you declared minus 1. So this is something that can come in handy if you want to just perform operations for a number of times, but we don't have an iterable that is exactly that length. We can use the range function to declare, let's say we want to do an operation 100 times. We don't have an iterable that is whose length is 100, we can use the range function to declare something in memory so that Python can perform the number of iterations that we want it to perform. So that is also another case of the for loop. We can use it this way to do that. So let's say we want to compute the square of all the numbers from 1 to 10. In this case, we can just say print I and then star 2. So that one will give us the exponent of all the numbers from 0 to 10. Of course, 1 squared is 1, and then you can see that it goes up to 100, which is 10 to the power 2. And so that is the use of the for loop in Python. There are some advanced concepts that will be explored in the intermediate series, but because this is a beginner series, we want to keep things as simple as we can. And so we will quickly take a look also at the for loops and then see how the two differ from each other and how probably we can blend the two to create our programs. I will still maintain the list of, and maybe just maintain everything, or let me even clear this once and maintain just the list of planets. And so the while loop also works just as the for loop. So while, and then the condition comes. While condition, then we also do something. And then here, the condition is always evaluated to or executes to a Boolean. So the while loop will check. The for loop will just start iterating if it has an iterable or a range. But the while loop will check if the condition assigned to it is true, then it will execute the block of code under it. But if the condition set to it executes to false, then it will just keep that particular line or that particular block of code. So the while loop uses a condition and the for loop does not use a condition. In our case, let us just say we are printing the numbers from, or let's just do what we did with the for loop, but in this case with the while loop. One of the ways you can go about it is just to test if the length of the planet list is not 0, then we want to print each of the items inside it. But because the while loop can end up in what we call an infinite loop, that is a loop that runs and never ends, we keep our program running. We put in some things to check it and to stop it. So just as it receives a condition to execute, we want to declare a condition for it also to stop if it meets a certain criteria. So let us declare a variable here we call index. For now, we set it equal to 0. And then we will check while, and then length of planet, the planet list is less than, we know that the length here is 8, 0 up to, yes, 8, 1 up to 8, because those are the planets. While it is less than 9, we want to do something. We want to print, and in this case we use what we used over there, so planets, and then in here we pass in index. So we want to print the planet at that particular index. On the first iteration, of course, index will be 0, but because this is also a loop and will execute, what Python will do is that if it gets to line 8, it will keep the value of index in memory, and then when it gets to any loop, until it finishes, it will not go to the next line. So it will just continue executing line 9 and 10, line 9 and 10, until the condition evaluates to false, or a certain condition, in this case, is met. So this index here will not be just 0, it will continue increasing. And that is one thing that we also now want to ensure. And after that, we have to increase the value of our index by 1. So index will now, the new index will now be equal to the old index plus 1. And it turns out that in Python there's a short way, or a shorthand notation of writing this index equal to index plus 1. We can just ignore this part and just say index plus equal to 1. But if this one confuses you, you can go ahead with the old one, the index equal to index plus 1. But just know that we can also use index plus equal to 1 to represent the same logic. So in this case, we have increased index in our loop. And that in that case, it will not just be 0, it will be increasing as the loop goes by. So let us run this one and see what the output will be. Oh, why is it not executing? We got exit code 0. I think there should be a problem or something wrong with our logic. While length of planet equals length of planet is less than 9. Let me run the code again. Okay, while length of planet is now not equal to 0. And let me see. Okay, we got it printed, but it also came with another error. Probably there was a mistake with our first logic. And now it says list index is out of range. That is the error that occurs when you are trying to access a particular element of a list that does not exist. So what happened was that Neptune is duplicated. Okay, that is what caused the error. Because instead of 8, now there was 9. I think so. So it was trying to access a particular index that does not exist. So after index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it was trying to access 9. 9 did not exist. So in here, we can go back to our previous logic. So while it is less than 9, then try running our code again and see. We still have another error. It's saying that its index is out of range. And that is because it is increasing it inside here. So one of the ways we can also work with the while loop is to declare up here the while true. And because the condition evaluates to a Boolean, this while true will also work. So while true, print planet at a particular index. And then let us now increase the index. But we want to check if the index equal to 8, that is after increasing the index or up to the last element, then we want to do something we call breaking out of the loop. So we can break out of the loop when a particular condition is fulfilled. But in order not to confuse ourselves so much, both ways will work. I will tell you the other way. We will now check the condition here that if we know how to use the if statement because we have done decision making. So if index now has been increased up to 8, so if index equal to 8, not 6 but 8, then break out of the loop. And we know that this will also evaluate to a Boolean. So if index is not equal to 8, then it will come to the next statement and increase index by 1. So this should fix the error for us. And it is still telling us that list index is out of range. And that error is still at line 10. Probably because we are printing the element before. So while true, print this, and if index equal to 8, break it, else index plus 1. I don't know why this thing still throws the error, but it shouldn't be so that list index is out of range. Let us try fixing it by bringing the printing down. That is after the index check, so that it will even break out of the loop before it checks whether the particular element is trying to access in the list exists. So when we brought the condition first, you see that the error has been catered for. So this is one of the ways also, as you code along, you have to think about how to structure your code to make it efficient Sometimes the thought you have in mind, you implement it, and that will not be how the program can run successfully, and you have to change and move things around, just like you saw me do. I intentionally did not pause the video or stop it to get rid of the errors. You saw all the errors that came, and I wish I could say they were intentional. They were not intentional errors. They were errors I actually got into, but I decided to just solve the error instead of just stopping the video or pausing it to stop it and then come and tell you something else. So that is also one of the things that you face in your programming journey. So the while loop may seem a little complicated, as I said, but it is not so complicated. We are just checking if a condition evaluates to true or false, then we do something, and then we put a condition inside our loop to prevent it from becoming an endless loop. The endless loop, let us demonstrate what the endless loop is, and then we see the way forward. So while true, in this case I will comment all this one out, and then while true, we want to print index, and then we will increase index by 1. So index plus equal to 1. So it will just print index and be increasing it. Let us see what the output will be. As you can see, it is still running. My program is still running, and currently it's just printing the numbers, and it will never end. So one of the ways to break out of this loop is to press Ctrl+C if you're on Windows. I believe it should be Command+C for Mac. Or if you're using PyCharm, you see this stop here, you can use it, or the one up here too, you can use it. So I'll click on this button and it will stop the execution of my code. And you see it is telling us that it was interrupted by Ctrl+C also. So you can use that one also to stop the execution of the loop, of the infinite loop. So that is the infinite loop we try to prevent by putting in the if condition to check the value of index at 8 and then break out of the loop. So you might be wondering, what then is the difference between the while loop and the for loop? And when do I use the while loop and when do I use the for loop? Well, the for loop is best to use when you have a defined iterable that you want to loop over and perform a particular operation. Like, you know exactly, this is the data I'm working with, it is of this length, this is the things I want to do with them, and then you can declare the for loop over them and then use the for loop to do it. But the while loop can also come in handy in case we don't know the number of times the program should execute. Like, we are computing things in memory, we don't know the length of the iterable that will come out, so we can use the while loop to cater for the situation where we don't know the length of the data we are dealing with. Or in case you have to write a command line application that will be used for voting, you don't know the number of people who come and vote, so you can just say that while true, then do the voting, but if a particular key is pressed, then break out of the loop and then display the result of the vote. And that will be difficult to do with the for loop, because with the for loop you have to declare an exact range that the iterations will be performed over. So I believe this did not turn out to be confusing, and if you still have any confusions, be sure to drop them in the comment section. Somebody from the Codebase family, including myself, will come up and then offer you a solution. And the best way to know these things, to get used to them, is for you to practice. So I encourage you to practice and practice and practice. So that will be the end for this video. I will see you another time with another video. Thank you.